I divorced my husband because I thought he was cheating, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I never thought I'd be the type of person to post something like this on Reddit, but here I am. I guess there's something cathartic about putting my story out there, even if it's to strangers on the internet. It's been a few months since everything went down, and I feel like I need to get this off my chest. Let me start by saying that I've always prided myself on being an intuitive person. I'm good at reading people, or at least I thought I was. My husband, let's call him Tom, and I had been married for 5 years. We had a good relationship, or so I believed. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. About a year ago, I started noticing small changes in Tom's behavior. At first, it was little things. He'd come home later than usual from work, or he'd be more protective of his phone. He started going out more often, saying he was meeting up with friends or had to stay late at the office. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I started noticing other things. One night, he came home smelling like perfume. I asked him about it, and he brushed it off, saying he'd hugged a colleague who was wearing a strong scent. I wanted to believe him, but something didn't sit right with me. That's when the doubts started creeping in. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I started snooping. I checked his phone whenever I could, looked at his social media messages, and even followed him a couple of times when he said he was going out. I didn't find anything concrete, but the paranoia had already taken hold. Every little thing he did seemed suspicious. If he laughed while texting, I assumed he was talking to someone else. If he was in a good mood, I wondered if it was because he'd been with her. The breaking point came when I found a receipt in his jacket pocket for a jewelry store. My heart sank. I knew he wasn't buying anything for me. He hadn't given me jewelry in years. I confronted him about it, and he looked genuinely confused. He claimed it was for a gift for his sister, but I didn't believe him. I couldn't. The trust was gone, and once that happens, it's like a poison that seeps into everything. We fought constantly, and every argument ended with me accusing him of cheating. Tom denied it over and over, but I was convinced he was lying. I couldn't see any other explanation for the changes in his behavior. After months of tension and fighting, I made the decision to file for divorce. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I couldn't stay in a marriage where I felt betrayed. Tom didn't fight it. He looked hurt, defeated even, but he didn't try to convince me to stay. That only confirmed my suspicions. If he wasn't willing to fight for us, then he must have someone else. The divorce went through quickly. We didn't have kids, so there wasn't much to sort out. I moved out of our house and into a small apartment. I thought I'd feel relief, but instead, I felt emptiness. I missed him, despite everything. I missed our life together, the little routines we had, the way he made me laugh. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Tom's sister at the grocery store. We'd always gotten along, so we chatted for a bit. She mentioned that she was sorry things hadn't worked out between Tom and me and that she hoped we could both move on. Then, she said something that shook me to my core. "I still have the necklace Tom bought for me for my birthday," she said, smiling. It was so sweet of him. I wear it all the time. My heart stopped. The necklace. The one I'd found the receipt for. The one that had been the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. He really had bought it for his sister. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't speak. I just nodded and mumbled something about needing to go. I left the store in a daze, my mind racing. Had I been wrong? Had I really thrown away my marriage because of a misunderstanding? When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I replayed every moment of the past year in my head, every fight, every accusation. What if I'd been wrong the whole time? What if Tom had been telling the truth? I felt sick. I did something I hadn't done in months. I called Tom. He answered on the second ring, sounding surprised to hear from me. We exchanged pleasantries, but I could tell he was waiting for me to get to the point. I took a deep breath and asked him, point blank, if he'd ever cheated on me. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but sad. "No, I never cheated on you," he said. "I loved you, and I never would have done that." I didn't know what to say. The relief I expected to feel wasn't there. Instead, I felt a crushing weight of guilt. I had ruined our marriage because I let my insecurities get the better of me. I'd been so convinced that he was lying that I hadn't listened to anything else. Tom and I talked for a while longer. He told me that he'd started staying late at work because he'd been trying to get a promotion to surprise me with a vacation. The perfume I'd smelled on him was from a coworker who'd hugged him after she got engaged. Every suspicion I'd had was rooted in something innocent, but I'd twisted it all into something sinister. We ended the call on a civil note, but I knew there was no going back. The damage had been done. We were divorced, and nothing could change that. I had to live with the consequences of my actions. So here I am, writing this out, hoping that maybe someone else can learn from my mistake. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once it's gone, everything falls apart. I didn't trust Tom, and I destroyed our marriage because of it. If you're reading this and you're in a similar situation, please, talk to your partner. Really talk. Don't let your fears and insecurities fester. Don't make the same mistake I did. Because once it's over, there's no going back. I still miss Tom. I still love him, in a way. But now, all I have are the memories of what could have been and the lessons I had to learn the hard way. Some days are better than others. There are times when I convince myself that maybe it was for the best, that maybe this was how it was supposed to go. But then there are days when I find myself staring at old photos, remembering the way he used to look at me, and I wonder what might have happened if I had just believed in him, in us. I've learned that relationships aren't just about love, they're about trust, communication, and understanding. I wish I could go back and do things differently. I wish I had asked more questions instead of jumping to conclusions. I wish I had let him explain instead of accusing him. But wishes don't change the past. I've started seeing a therapist to work through my feelings, to understand why I let my insecurities destroy something that was once so good. It's a slow process, but I'm learning to forgive myself. I'm learning that it's okay to make mistakes, as long as you learn from them. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day, Tom and I will be able to have a conversation without the weight of what happened between us. Maybe we'll even become friends again. Or maybe we'll go our separate ways, never to cross paths again. Whatever happens, I know that I'll carry this experience with me for the rest of my life. It's a painful lesson, but one that has taught me more about myself than I ever wanted to know. To anyone reading this, I hope you can take something away from my story. Trust your partner, but more importantly, trust yourself. Don't let fear and doubt cloud your judgment. And if you're ever in doubt, talk it out. You might just save yourself from making the same mistake I did. Thanks for listening. #update, I begged him to take me back, and we made up. Hey, Reddit. It's been a while since I last posted, and a lot has happened since then. I didn't think I'd be back here with an update, but I feel like I owe it to those of you who followed my story and offered advice and support. After my last post, when I realized that I had been wrong about Tom, I couldn't get the thought out of my head. The guilt and regret weighed on me heavily, and no matter how hard I tried to move on, I just couldn't let it go. I missed him so much, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. It took me a couple of weeks to build up the courage, but I finally decided that I had to reach out to Tom. I wasn't sure what I expected. Part of me thought he'd hang up on me, or worse, tell me he'd already moved on with someone else. But I knew that if I didn't try, I'd never forgive myself. I called him one evening, my heart pounding as the phone rang. When he answered, I could hear the surprise in his voice. We hadn't spoken much since the divorce, just a few awkward texts here and there, so I think he was caught off guard. I didn't beat around the bush. I told him everything, how sorry I was, how I realized I'd been wrong, how much I missed him, and how I'd give anything to have another chance. My voice cracked a few times, and by the end, I was crying. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought he was going to tell me that it was too late, that there was no going back. But then he spoke, and his voice was soft, almost hesitant. I never wanted to lose you, he said. But you hurt me. A lot. Hearing those words broke my heart all over again. I knew how much pain I'd caused him, but hearing him say it out loud made it even more real. I told him I understood if he couldn't forgive me, but I begged him to at least talk to me in person, to give me a chance to show him how much I regretted what I'd done. To my surprise, Tom agreed to meet up. We decided to meet at a park we used to visit together when we were still married. It was a place full of good memories, and I think we both needed that comfort. When I saw him in person, it was like a punch to the gut. He looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping well, and there was a sadness in his eyes that I knew I'd put there. I wanted to hug him, to hold him and tell him how sorry I was, but I didn't. Instead, we sat on a bench and just talked. We talked for hours. I told him everything I'd been feeling since the divorce, how I'd been trying to work on myself, and how much I regretted not trusting him. I told him about the therapy sessions I'd started and how they made me realize that my trust issues had nothing to do with him and everything to do with my own fears and insecurities. Tom listened to everything I had to say. He didn't interrupt, didn't get angry, he just listened. When I was done, he finally opened up about how the divorce had affected him. He told me how much it had Hurt to be accused of something he didn't do, how he tried so hard to make our marriage work, and how heartbroken he'd been when I left. Hearing him say all of that broke me. I'd been so caught up in my own pain and paranoia that I hadn't considered how much I was hurting him. I told him again how sorry I was, and that I'd do anything to make it right. After that conversation, we agreed to take things slowly. Tom wasn't ready to jump back into a relationship right away, and I understood that. We started meeting up more often, talking things through, and gradually rebuilding the trust we'd lost. It wasn't easy. There were times when old wounds reopened, when we both got frustrated or scared. But we kept talking, kept being honest with each other. I continued my therapy sessions, working on my issues with trust and communication, and Tom started going to therapy too, to work through his own pain. As the weeks went by, we started to reconnect in a way that we hadn't in a long time. We went on dates, did things we used to love doing together, and slowly, the distance between us began to close. We weren't the same people we were before the divorce, but in a way, that was a good thing. We were both learning and growing, and our relationship was becoming stronger because of it. A few months after we started talking again, Tom asked me if I'd like to move back in with him. He said he'd missed having me around, and that he felt like we were finally in a place where we could start fresh. I didn't hesitate, I said yes. Moving back in wasn't a magic fix. We still had a lot of work to do, but we were both committed to making it work this time. We set boundaries, made sure to communicate openly about everything, and most importantly, we made a pact to trust each other. If either of us had doubts or fears, we promised to talk about them instead of letting them fester. It's been a few months since then, and I'm happy to say that things are going well. We're not perfect, and we still have our moments, but we're learning to navigate this new chapter of our relationship together. Every day, I'm grateful that Tom was willing to give us another chance, and I'm determined not to let my insecurities ruin what we're rebuilding. A new beginning. Looking back, I realize how close I came to losing the love of my life because of my own fears. It's something I'll always carry with me, but I'm choosing to see it as a lesson rather than a regret. I'm working on being a better partner, a better communicator, and most importantly, a better version of myself. Tom and I have talked about the future, and while we're not rushing into anything, we're both hopeful. We're taking things one day at a time, and we're making sure to enjoy every moment we have together. It feels like we've been given a second chance, and I'm not going to waste it. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, I just want to say this: don't be afraid to fight for the people you love, but make sure you're fighting for the right reasons. Trust is fragile, and once it's broken, it takes a lot of work to repair. But if you're both willing to put in the effort, it is possible to find your way back to each other. Thank you to everyone who supported me through this journey. Your words and advice meant more than you know, and I'm grateful for this community. Here's to new beginnings, and to never giving up on the things that matter most.